a few things. And the very first thing is the polls on the channel. Really appreciate you taking part in them. Loads of people did. And the first one we're going to discuss, which will probably be a whole separate video, is should MediaTek, excuse me, should MediaTek make the processor for the next Sony flagship? Now, that was quite a divisive one, and most people said no, Qualcomm should continue to make all of the flagship processors for the Xperia 1 and Xperia 5 families, given the fact that the Snapdragon series has generally and historically been the very best smartphone processor around. However, I would argue that MediaTek actually has something to offer in the Sony flagship space. The reason I think that is because I've reviewed a lot of MediaTek phones, and over the years I've been getting progressively better and better and better. And the one that has really changed my mind on MediaTek is this. This is ROG Phone 6D. It has an air vent and the aeroactive cooling fan that plugs in cools it through an air vent, but simultaneously, even if you don't have the air vent, it still runs cooler than a lot of other phones I've tested when playing top settings Genshin Impact. So with that in mind, I think it would be really interesting to understand a little bit more about what MediaTek is actually able to offer that Qualcomm can't in the flagship space for 2023. We've seen the Dimensity 9000 do really great things. So with that, in the coming weeks, I'll be going to the annual MediaTek conference, in which I'll be getting an insight into all of the plans for 2023 and potentially beyond. Now, processors are really interesting because they don't just dictate the power or how cool a phone runs. The ISP in the processor helps dictate how it handles imaging. Obviously, a processor efficiency helps dictate how the phone lasts when it comes to battery. In fact, if you've seen on the channel my Pixel 7 review, we've got the Pixel 7 Pro right here. A little bit of a closer look at the Pixel 7 Pro. My experiences when it comes to battery life for the Pixel 7 was so inconsistent. The 7 Pro had been better, but the Tensor chip, Google's adaptive battery technology, all of those come together to with the Tensor, like the architecture behind it, which Samsung creates the like technology behind the Tensor chip. So what I'm trying to say is all of those come together to make the phone last as long as it does. And it has been so inconsistent because it's tried to marry software and hardware to the nth degree. MediaTek chips have, in the last few years, always been relatively efficient. In the past, though, that's probably because they've been a little bit more underpowered than top-end Qualcomm chips. But now, in addition to being efficient, they are also running power with gaming phone levels of power. So super interesting right there. So like I said, have the MediaTek conference I will be attending. If anyone would like to ask any questions, I'll have access to MediaTek executives and we can put them to those execs. Right, now on to the second poll. And we had a poll asking you which brand was your favorite smartphone brand other than Sony. Now, the reason it was other than Sony was because we already know you guys are Sony fans. We're Sony fans. We like Sony. We love a lot of the aspects of the products. However, we also want to know what we're going to make videos for that will scratch your itches, videos of. And we want to find out exactly the kind of phones that you guys love. So it was really interesting. We ran 3 polls with 5 choices each. And the reason we did that, and the other reason we left Sony out, is because we had 16 brands, including Sony. Each poll runs with a maximum of 5 choices. And so we ran those 3 polls with 5 choices other than Sony because we knew they'd already be in the running for all of the phones we're going to be covering. And your top 5 were Samsung, Apple, Nokia, Asus, and Google, not in that order. Then when we ran a final poll, over 350 of you voted, and your absolute winner, surprisingly, it was a late change in the game when it came to the poll as well. Up until maybe the fourth day, it was Samsung who was leading the charge. But interestingly, Google edged ahead. Now, this could just be because of the Pixels. Google's fresher in people's minds. But the Pixels and Google phones specifically are this channel's, according to that poll, favorite smartphone brand. Now, the reason I find that interesting is because Google only releases 2 phones a year, and that's pretty great going considering some of the other competition. I was really impressed that Asus did as well as it did. I'm not surprised insofar as I really like what Asus is doing, especially in the gaming phone space. It's doing something different. Gaming phones and compact phones, really interesting for a brand to be focusing on those two kind of more niche markets. Also, surprised to see Nokia in there. It's just announced the X35G with a IMX766 50 megapixel camera, optically image stabilized. It's announced its Circle more recycling plan effectively. So both of these brands doing something quite different. One commenter mentioned that they would be happy if the channel focused a bit more on smaller, lesser kind of covered brands, and I do understand that. However, it was great to see Samsung in the mix as well, obviously, but with Samsung as well, like this channel in the past, historically, used to do speed sketches all the time, and I use a Galaxy Z Fold. I think that you won't be able to see. There you go. Let me drop the brightness a little bit. I use the Z Fold 4 every day for things like mind mapping, and you can see I've got the Concept app here, and I will put it over my face. I use the pen, doodling on it, sketching on it. So at the moment, what I'm currently doing is I'm working out a video that's going to give you an idea as to what it's like to use a foldable and the pen on the foldable every single day as part of your workflow. A lot of the reviews I've seen have been really great at giving the people an impression of how well the pen performs and how well the fold performs generally, but they don't necessarily all show you this extent to which you can use it as an artist's tool or a note-taking tool. So currently I'm working on a video for that. So if you have any questions about the Samsung Fold 4, please do ping them in the comment section below. Cool. So Google Pixel number 1, Samsung number 2. Then the interesting one, the most interesting one, was the fact Apple got 17% of your votes. It's not that I'm surprised. Apple makes great phones. I use an iPad as my primary tablet as well, so it goes beyond phones. I use a MacBook as my primary computer, and I also use a Windows device too, and I interchange between them quite regularly. I understand the mark of quality there, but I was under the impression that this channel was predominantly Android enthusiasts, Sony, for example, and with that in mind, I'm really, really curious as to why people voted for Apple. For me, the reason I would opt for an Apple device is because, number one, if I'm recommending it to someone who just wants an easy ride, Apple is more expensive. So if someone isn't afraid to pay a little bit more, but they want an easy ride with software, potentially want a place they can physically go, Apple's a great shout. The hardware is also reliably good, not necessarily pushing the boundaries when it comes to best-in-class camera tech, for example, or something like that, but definitely reliably good. But you do pay a premium, and you don't necessarily get groundbreaking stuff in the phones, but you do get groundbreaking stuff in the laptops. And for video editing, nothing really for me comes close to my MacBook, but then I do like the versatility, emulators, everything else like that of Windows. So horses for courses there. We've got a question from Mahesh Murali, who says, what do you think about other foldables like the one from Vivo or Xiaomi? I think the foldable space is super, super interesting right now. I have currently got the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2, and it just is a very, very beautiful device. Like you can see as I open and close it ever so slightly, its animation refreshes to reflect what I'm doing with it. So the live wallpaper, right through to the day-to-day usability, the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 in it, the camera with its Leica tuning. I really, really love this phone. In fact, if I would be able to have this phone, the Xiaomi 12 Mix 2, with the pen of the Z Fold 4, and possibly its waterproofing, I'd really, really like pick that phone as my daily phone over any other phone that I've used at the moment. Now, the Mix Fold 2 is quite cool because it is slimmer. I've got a case on it at the moment, and it still feels like pretty beautifully slim. It's also got a front display that is much, much more like a standard phone versus the long phone on the long screen on the Z Fold forefront. And I've got a case on both of them, and admittedly one of them houses a pen, but you can see the thickness difference between that. It's pretty nuts, like just how Xiaomi's managed to squish this in. But you don't get things like flex mode, so it will hold, but then it will flip out, and then when you try and do that, it will flip out more easily. So you don't get things like flex mode where you can half fold the display, which you do on the Z Fold 4, and it's integrated into part of the interface. Interestingly, some apps like Disney Plus still activate a flex mode when you half fold it, which is like means that the phone is telling the app that it is half folding. So the app has been written to work not just with Samsung foldables, but other foldables too. So that's cool. But the actual hardware, the hinge mechanism, doesn't really support the half fold in that way. But if you can live without flex mold, you can live without waterproofing. The only foldable phone that I have damaged is the Mate XS, which has an outward foldable display. And that's because another phone, a P50 Pro, actually slid off the surface and fell on it, and it dinged the screen. And so I've damaged that foldable, but I've never damaged an actual foldable before that has an inner display. So I've been using this loads, like as a primary phone for 2 weeks, and then pretty much every day for something. At the moment, I use it for reading magazines or actually watching masterclass, doing an article on what Annie Leibovitz has taught me about photography for digital camera world. So I use it as a working device. Kickstand, great screen, great phone. So hopefully that's answered your question a little bit. I haven't used a Vivo phone, but I think what I'm trying to say is, in a roundabout way, every smartphone maker is doing something a little bit different, focusing on pen input, focusing on slimness. The Vivo phone packs a telephoto camera in there, just like the Huawei Mate X2. And that needs to happen until more foldable phones are out in different markets. And then as more foldable phones are launched in different markets, the competition can really begin. But in the West right now, it's a Samsung race. Motorola, you could say, is getting in there, but really it is a Samsung race. We've had another question on the Google Pixel 7. Your thoughts, please? That's from Josh BFC27. I really, really love the Google Pixel 7, and I don't think you'll be surprised by that at all. The reviews, a lot of them have gone out and they've been excellent. I'll run through what it is that I love about the phone in order, and I'm going to start with the design, and in order to do that I need to take off the case. So I've got the pretty beautiful light green one with gold trimmings, and as you can see, it's the metal element at the top has attracted fingerprints a fair bit, but generally it looks and feels super premium. The polished frame, I need to get my face out of the way, there you go. The polished frame looks really rich, and it feels really rich in the hand as well. It's slightly flatter sides than a lot of curved display phones. The fingerprint scanner is responsive as well. And with all of that, it feels like good. It feels good in the hand. IP68 water and dust resistant as well, gives you a degree of confidence. The thing I'm not confident in is the screen. As soon as I get this phone, if I would get this phone if I was going to buy it, I would get a screen protector. I've seen quite a few people on Twitter say that the display has been scratched. It is Gorilla Glass Victus, but we have all seen Gorilla Glass Victus scratch before. So The design is beautiful, and it feels robust and hardy to a point. Obviously, it will still crack, but the screen scratching would be my main worry early on. I think that the screen itself is really high quality, like it's punchy, it's bright. I've been outdoors in very, very bright lighting, 120 hertz refresh rate. With such a big screen, I was a bit concerned about the battery life, 6.7 inches, but actually battery life has been more consistent and more consistently good than the Pixel 7, which I found on day one lasted a few hours, and I was really concerned. But then by day 7, it was lasting a whole day. I had a whole day pretty much within 2 days on the Pixel 7 Pro, which is great going. The fact it has wireless charging as well as a boon. It doesn't charge as quickly as other phones, but if you know a lot about battery tech, or if you want to preserve your phone's battery, you may do what I do, which is charge it up to around between 60 and 80%, and then it drops between 20 and 30%, and keep the charge range within that range. And so I do that either with a wireless or wired charger, and I find I don't really need super fast charging personally. But I would say that the standout thing for me, coming from the Pixel 7, is without a shadow of a doubt the battery life, but also that camera. Now, Google's cameras have a rep for being like really great and user friendly. They aren't necessarily the most natural. I would say Motorola is the brand that processes its photos the most aggressively when it comes to contrast and saturation. I really don't like the look of Motorola phones. The new Edge 30 Ultra is an excellent phone. I love it, and for the price, it's fantastic. But when you take a picture, it looks like it's already had an Instagram filter run over it. The other end of the spectrum is something like a Sony phone or an iPhone with that's shot in RAW. Like raw iPhone photos look really good, better than the raw photos from the Google Pixel, for example. But in plain automatic mode, the Google Pixel and the iPhone are similar insofar as they both process out their photos quite a bit. They both sharpen their photos, but they are very pleasing to virtually everyone who looks at them. My mum was looking at some of the photos that I took. I was away earlier this week in Norwich, and I can actually pull up a few pictures. If you check out the Tech Edit Twitter, tech_edit_, I posted them on there of animals, and they look really like just ready to go, ready to share. Don't need any editing. They don't look particularly flat, but they look good. I also took some photos in Norwich Cathedral, which I can scroll through, and also the zoom is excellent. More on that later. But the photos just look ready to go, ready to share, as processed as you'd probably want them to be if you didn't know that much about photography, or you felt like you didn't want to edit the photo, you wanted to quickly fire it off. So really like the Pixel 7 Pro. The other thing that rocked my world was the camera zoom when taking video. The video quality of the camera is so impressive for handshake regulation, and also like clarity. I took a video when in a park of some swans, and actually another park of some ducks. And let me find the duck picture. It's a really good illustration as to the duck video. Sorry, let me lower the volume, and hopefully you can see. It's really good illustration as to how the 5x zoom does. I'm holding this handheld. It looks like I'm on a tripod or gimbal. You can see I've changed shutter angle, camera angle of view, and I've gone wide. But the telephoto range is great. So I was at a gig, I used the zoom, someone behind me tapped me on the shoulder and said, "What phone is that? I really want to know, because the zoom on it is so amazing." We were stuck right at the back. It looked like the footage I was getting was pretty much middle of the venue / nearer the front. So really good. There are some drawbacks to any Pixel phone, and I can see Aranda said no expandable storage along with dual SIM, which is a deal breaker. It's not hard to include them. You're right, but it isn't Google's style. It isn't Apple's style. They're not going to change for little old us with our wants and needs. However, it is a competitive phone despite that. Let's have a look at what some other people, and also Josh, hopefully that's answered your question on the Google Pixel 7 Pro questions. But if you have any more specific ones, please fire them through and I can let you know how I found it. The video review will be live, but again, I said this last week, rather than do standard video reviews, I want to make the reviews help you feel like you've been using the devices yourself. So that would be really helpful. If there were specific questions, I'll try and make sure to include them in the review. Right, some more questions. Conrad, I searched for a high quality wireless charger for my Xperia 1 Mark III. Nice design, good materials, fast charging, good cooling. Any proposals? In terms of wireless charging for the Xperia 1 Mark III, my only real experience with wireless chargers for Sony phones is Kensington and Anker, and both do a good job. What I actually have is Anker MagSafe battery pack that also supports USB charging. It's quite handy. I have cases for some phones. I've got it for the Pixel 7 right here that supports MagSafe as well. And then even if you don't have a MagSafe phone, you can still rest it on that charger. If you do have a MagSafe phone, it clips on. And if you don't want to use wireless charging, you want to charge a bit quicker, that charges with a USB port. Let me check out the name for that. Anker MagSafe charger USB port. That is a I believe kickstand. It has a kickstand. Sorry about this. If I can't find this now, I'll be sure to pop it in the comments. 633, Anker 633. I'll drop that into the live chat. And I've used that with the Xperia 1 Mark IV, and it works really, really well. So why it's not letting me paste the link. Anker 633. And hopefully that is going to work for you. Right. Nuxley, video camera overheating while in cinema mode. Anyone? I just found cinema mode to be so much like cinematic mode on the iPhone, insofar as it was fine, but it wasn't something I would choose to use. So I don't think anyone who is going to want to catch great quality content is going to stay in cinematic mode long enough for it to overheat. It can work well, but for me personally, it just ended up blurring my ears out, or my curly hair just was too much for it at times. And again, no one's got this right, whether you're talking about Samsung, Apple, Huawei, or indeed Google. No one's got video portrait mode to work as well as I'd want it to. So yeah, does it overheat in cinematic mode? Maybe. And like I said with my Pixel 7 time with the Pixel 7, it gets very hot. The Pixel 7 got hotter than the Pro without a doubt, especially over 5G. Then it eventually cooled down. And so if people have reported it overheating, there is a possibility. I'm not making excuses for the phone, but there is a possibility in that early time with the phone, it overheated. But if you want me to do a cinematic mode test, I will do that if that's something you're interested in. And I can just do a YouTube short about how long I was able to record in cinematic mode before it conked out and overheated. Let me know if that's of interest, please, Nuxley, and I will give that a shot. Leon Hart, Xperia Z Ultra series. I miss the Ultra so much. The Ultra was so good. If you don't remember what the Xperia Z Ultra was, it was like the thinnest phone in the world that still had a headphone jack. It was a huge phone at the time, and it probably is still a pretty big phone. It's a phablet, and it was such a true gadget. It was powerful. It was slim. It was like as slim as an ebook reader, but as powerful as a flagship phone. Really, really liked it, but a really awkward size. It sat between flagship smartphone and tablet, and I'm 6'4", and it barely fit in my pocket. So it was a tall order for widescreen adoption, but like mainstream adoption. There you go. But I really, really loved the Xperia Ultra series. Leetronics, greetings. Hey, Leetronics, good to see you. Mahesh Murali, Xperia is not available here in the Middle East. Do you know what any store that ships internationally? I'm afraid I don't. I apologize for that. The one that I usually go with for international shipping are things like AliExpress. Possibly you can try something like Clove as well. Let me know what phone you're interested in. It would be interesting to see what you are after. Conrad, it's not that easy to include. Yep, talking to Randa about the lack of SD card slot in the Pixel. At 128 gigabytes, I know that that isn't enough for me if I'm going to use a phone for 2 years. My WhatsApp backup alone is about 21, 22 gigabytes. So I understand that. And then when you were talking about 256 gigabytes, it gets a lot more expensive. Nuxley, Pixel 7 Pro camera overheating in cinematic mode. Yeah, we've already covered that. Leetronics agrees with Aranda about the storage not being expandable being a deal breaker. That's interesting, and that's an area that Sony generally does win out. So right, we've got that pretty much covered in terms of the Google Pixel 7. We're also, just make sure, thank you for your time on the Pixel 7 Pro, impressed with your take on it. I appreciate that, Josh. It was very much a stream of consciousness, but I appreciate you following it. So, as I said, Google Pixel 7 Pro, #1 smartphone brand of this channel after Sony, of course. Calm down, Sony fans. And then that's followed by Samsung, Apple, and followed by Asus and Nokia, and all of the others. OnePlus got an honorable mention, even though I'm curious about how everyone feels about OnePlus at the moment, since it was more explicitly absorbed into Oppo. Sentiment towards OnePlus amongst my circle of friends and peers has changed a little bit, especially with the launch of the 10T. You still get great phones from OnePlus, and it's like OnePlus is also putting forward great MediaTek powered phones, Qualcomm powered phones. The 10R is a phone that I've been using, which I quite like as well. But in the same breath, it hasn't necessarily got the cool factor it once had. It hasn't got the hardcore loyal fan appeal it once did. That's what I'm seeing. Be interesting to know what you guys think. Right. Now we have some weekly news. The new iPads are out, and there's been a lot of conjecture about whether or not these are actually worth upgrading to, not least of all by me. So a bit of a backstory. I review and use Android tablets on the daily. I think my favorite Android tablet is, unsurprisingly, the Galaxy S8 Ultra, because that screen, well, if you're close to it, it feels like a virtual reality experience. It sucks you in. AMOLED, clarity, pow, pow, pow. I love drawing and writing on it. And Android apps as well are getting better and better for drawing and writing on. I put my Galaxy Z Fold 4 up to the camera a little bit earlier to show you one of the apps I use. This is the Concept app. You can see the screen and the crease in all its glory. So I mind map a lot. If I'm at my iPad, I tend to use GoodNotes, but Concept is great because it has an infinite canvas. So for mind mapping, that's really, really handy. What isn't so great about it is the fact you don't necessarily have cloud syncing, and there are a few other things I'd change about the app, but very, very good. So with apps like that making their way onto Android, and of course the Samsung Galaxy S8 Ultra supporting things like apps like LumaFusion for video editing. That's my favorite Android tab. But I have my day-to-day tablet of choice is an iPad 2019. I bought that. I've been using it a lot since, and also apps like DaVinci Resolve, that was announced this week, a video editing app, which is industry standard for color grading. Color grading is correcting color effectively and fine-tuning it in movie, and it's used the app DaVinci Resolve in like feature films. The fact that's coming to iPad, optimized for Apple's Silicon M1, M2, and with the 12.9 M1 onwards, it supports HDR. All really, really cool. But I'm not going to upgrade to the new iPad. I don't need a better camera. I can use the Magic case that the old iPads support, the keyboard cover, with my 2019 iPad Pro 12.9, and the new additions to iOS 16 that have been added to iPad OS, sorry, that have been added to old iPads like the 2019 when it comes to support, mean that I just don't see the need for an upgrade myself. Is there anyone in the chat considering upgrading to the new iPad? If there is, let me know what you think the killer feature is. If this year they had like an OLED screen, or if they had like something really that got me by like the neck and just was like, look at me, I'm much better than your tablet, I'd probably consider it. But at the moment, there really isn't anything. Alongside the iPad Pro, though, there is also a new iPad available in a load of colors. It's going to be plenty powerful, looks a lot like the iPad Air. But again, really expensive tablets, especially if you're in the UK. And Apple products tend to last a really long time. So my 2019 iPad Pro is performing like an absolute champ, whether I'm gaming on it, which I don't do too much these days, but definitely video editing, everything like that works really well. So Apple iPad Pro 2019 is still going to be my daily driver and tablet, probably until the next iPad's announced, when I can reassess my decision. So we've covered the iOS 16.1's also launching on the 24th of October. That's exciting. Apple's like one of those companies, it's like Canon. It puts blocks in place for things and then removes those blocks and treats that like a feature. So Fitness Plus will now work without an Apple Watch. It should have worked without an Apple Watch from day one. It's a subscription that you're paying for, and it's a video that plays back. It doesn't need to sync with your Apple Watch. But now Apple's actually making it compatible with iOS 16.1. If you do have an iOS device, 24th of October is the day for you. So that's going to be Monday. I'm going to have a quick look at the chat, see if anyone else has any questions, thoughts, feelings. What do you think about Nothing Phone? That's a really good question. Again, Mahesh, specifically not because of the Nothing Phone, because I really like the Nothing Phone. If you check out digitalcameraworld.com, I wrote a review of it there, and it is an incredibly good first effort from Nothing. But Nothing's been in the news this week because the Nothing Ear 1 has had a price bump. It's now $150. I bought mine for £99. And so now that it's more expensive, I feel pretty vindicated, considering I quite like using them. For the price, they were a really great buy. But the London Fashion Week, Nothing also showed off the Ear Stick. Then they also did the Nothing thing, which was the OnePlus thing. Seems like Nothing has gone and taken OnePlus's cool factor with it. And one of the marketing tools it employs is it leaks, drip feeds elements into the media in the run up to a launch, whether it's a set of earbuds or indeed whether it is a phone. And the drip feed that has come with the Nothing Ear Stick is that the weight is down to 4.4 kilograms, sorry, 4.4 grams, kilograms. Can you imagine? 4 points down from 4.7. And so they're going to be really light. Nothing says you should be wearing them all day long. Am I really that excited? No, they're a pair of wireless buds. It'll be interesting to see if Nothing's going after like the AirPods Pro kind of range, the FreeBuds Pro 2, the Magic Buds Pro from Honor, or if this is alternative that's just a little bit lighter and thinner and smaller, that costs around the same as the Ear 1. The fact it's been showcased at London Fashion Week just suggests to me that it is more of a fashion thing. The fact it's lighter as well, and the sound quality may even be a little bit worse than the traditional Ear 1s were. Who's to say? It'll be a few days until they are launched officially. Right, we've also had some Xperia rumors as well. The Xperia rumor specifically is that the new Xperia 1 Mark V looks like it may have more front cameras and fewer rear cameras. This was, I think, on Notebook Check. I left a link in the description of this video, so if you run over and read that news article. So more front cameras, fewer rear cameras. That could be because Sony's putting in a stronger continuous zoom, or it could be because Sony wants to dial back the spec of the phone to bring the price down. Sony phones have been historically really expensive, and that isn't necessarily serving them so well when they're trying to compete with the very best, because they're held back by problems that have persisted throughout generations of phones, such as heat management. Could Sony be trying to dial things back by including fewer cameras but high quality cameras? I was asked about the Nothing phone by Mahesh. What I really love about the Nothing phone is that there's no filler. It's all great camera features on there. So you've got two main cameras at the back, the wide and the ultra wide, and no macro camera that is 2 megapixel and is going to make you take a bad picture. Instead, you've got better ultra wide camera that can also double as a macro. How about dual cameras on a Sony phone on the front? I'm not sure I really need that. Google's Pixel 7 and 7 Pro have ultra wide selfie camera, and that looks to me like a really great shout, because it's like less size on the front of your display, so less either bezel or a smaller punch hole, and it also means you go from wide to a regular field of view with a crop rather than requiring 2 separate cameras. Then again, I'm not a massive selfie taker. Maybe they're going to start appealing to vloggers. Maybe they'll put a flagship grade 12 megapixel camera with optical image stabilization on the front as well as the back of the camera, so that Sony can take its appeal to creators to that next level. It'll be interesting to see, and we can make a call on what it is all day long and not necessarily be right. But I'll be reading your comments, so if you've got any thoughts, please fire them in the comment section below. Someone left a comment at the beginning of this video before we actually started, Leo Pahis, about thoughts on the Sony Xperia Pro I Mark II and what you want to see from it. What I want to see from the Xperia Pro Mark II is a collection of cameras that is very competitive. I want to see an actual 1-inch sensor size on the main camera, and what would be great is a 1-inch sensor, not just a type 1 sensor that's cropped down, a 1-inch sensor with a variable aperture. That would be so good. For anyone who hasn't used the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, that has a Sony 1-inch sensor in it, and it's a really great phone, but what it doesn't do very well is handle close-up objects, because the sensor's so large. It's got a fixed aperture, and the depth of field is incredibly shallow. And so what you end up with when you're trying to take a photo of something that's nearer than about 30 centimeters is very little of that photo being in sharp detail. What as a result would help that is a variable aperture. If you're able to take the aperture even to f4, f5 versus I think it's f1.7 or 1.8 on here, you would be able to increase that depth of field, so it's less shallow, doesn't look as expensive, but is more functional, more versatile. The new iPhone suffers from it too, and in fact the new iPhone suffers even more because it doesn't actually get particularly close to a subject, the main camera. The closest focal distance on the new iPhone is much further than the old iPhone, and that's probably its weakest area as a camera phone for me personally. So I would love to see a great large primary sensor in the Pro i2, but I'd also love to see excellent secondary cameras, possibly a periscope camera as is included in the Pixel 7 Pro. And buy a periscope camera. I ideally would like a continuous one. That would be a wonderful showcase of Sony's innovation and technology. But I would settle for any periscope camera because the zoom camera on the Pro I was comparatively weak versus the One. So yes, you got a great main camera, but you didn't get necessarily a great camera experience on the whole. And I'd also love an excellent auto-focusing ultra-wide camera. If it has macro, brilliant. If macro focus, but I think the focus should just be on priority. Sony's trademark more natural processing matched with a better automatic mode. Even on the Pro I just think Sony needs to up its game with computational photography and a suite of excellent cameras around the back. That's what I would want. And if you're talking about specific focal lengths I'd want, it's super traditional, around a 16 millimeter or lower ultra wide, a 24 millimeter primary camera, and maybe if it was continuous, 3 through to 5 times zoom, or 3 through to more than that would be great. If it was fixed, I'd probably want 4.4 or 5 times zoom. Let me know your thoughts. It's time to read some comments and for me to do less talking. Where did we get to? Okay. Eranda, keep removing important parts, then you're stuck with something that doesn't give you much freedom, and that's with regards to the Pixel not including a removable storage. Totally understand where you're coming. Lee, I can't put my S8 Ultra down, Tab S8 Ultra. iPad Pro has become a dust collector. Interesting. Apple refused to unlock the power of the iPad, making it an insane expensive slab of glass. Lee, please tell me what it is you use your S8 Ultra for the most. Also, I'm super jealous. I had to send mine back after I reviewed it. You can see my review on stuff.tv and Digital Camera World and Creative Block. I reviewed that for a lot of places, partly so I could hold on to it for as long as possible so I could test it out. I love drawing on it. Oh my gosh. Play Sony PS5 or PS4 remote play on the Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra is just such an absolute dream. So then, Josh, I would never go with an Apple phone due to them slowing down the phone a few years ago. I get what you're saying there. Now, I spoke to quite a few people on this. I was actually invited to speak on Sky News about the phone slowing down situation. And there's I don't want to defend Apple, but there's an ongoing battery management issue that they were facing, from what I understand. It isn't right necessarily at all, but it wasn't for no reason. That was after speaking with some people who understand the technical side of things far better than I do. And also, like, there's so much attention being paid to Apple that if they ever tried anything like that again, it would make headlines. So I think they've, touch wood, maybe learned their lesson. What I will say about Apple phones is they do tend to work well, at least across all areas. But I do agree, you do pay for the premium, you pay for the luxury of potentially a fair few features being locked down versus Android counterparts. Lee, this new rolling glass on the verge of becoming the new gen of screen of its kind, I hear. Oh, rolling glass, like as in Motorola, as in rollable phones, or am I completely out of the loop? Please let me know. I use it for everything: productivity, writing, music scores, stocks and investments, and generally everything, including photo editing. The screen estate is perfect. So, Lee, you look like you're in, or you sound like you're in love with your Tab S8 Ultra, and I am not surprised. Quite a lot of reviewers who tested it didn't necessarily get what it brought to the table. They felt it was very niche, but it's heartening to know that someone else like me really enjoys using it. Floating windows are great on it, and also photo editing is just winning. Cool. It's been quite a long show. It's only really meant to go on for around half an hour or so, but you've been super, super chatty. I've obviously not stopped talking, so I really appreciate the people who've stuck it out, stayed in the room. And if you have any thoughts, feelings, questions, things you want for this channel going forward, please ping them in the comments section below. What I will say, again, I said this at the beginning of the video, it's been a bit quiet on the channel for a long while, and obviously the brands have changed from Sony 365 through to Tech Edit. But the plan is for the channel so that you guys are in the loop. Take the polls that we've done, look at the kind of brands you want to see more of. So do send comments through. I do read every single one and try to respond where I can. We've created another channel, Tech Edit on the Go, and that's going to be quick, rough, ready, one take videos. So not too dissimilar to this. You asked me, Josh, for my impressions of the Pixel. I would do perhaps a one take video explaining the Pixel in more detail without necessarily it being a polished, edited piece. And on this channel, Tech Edit, you'll be getting live shows weekly, but all of the rest of the content will be more polished. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show and appreciate you taking part. Anything I didn't get to answer, shoot it through again in the comments and I will do my best too. Thank you so much, and you all have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Bye.